Orrin Klopper. I got it right. I
Perfect.
somehow I just totally drew like I'm here with Orrin Klopper, CEO of Netsurit, and we're going to talk about the M&A space and how it applies to like managed service providers and IT companies. And I'm really glad to have you here today. I love to have a business owner on the show who's out there in the field doing what we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Really happy to be talking to you too.
Just kind of give everybody let's do a little bit of the background story. Kind of tell us a little bit about like kind of Netsurit, how you started it, why you started it, so we can kind of tie that to the rest of the story as we get into as your journey.
Yeah, sure. So at university, I connected with some friends. One of them was an engineer, and he was already selling engineering calculators and computers to engineers and to friends and family. And I took information systems as an extra major in my second year, and he invited me to come sell for them. And yeah, I haven't looked back since then. And then that was 96, sorry, 95, and that's where my journey started. And then in 96, I pretty much said I want to do this full time. And then up in the lead up to Y2K, I just saw so many entrepreneurial SMB businesses being exploited, Ron. They were just being taken total advantage of, sold technology and solutions they didn't actually need. And we realized that there was an opportunity to build a transparent, honest, values-based organization to deliver service to this SMB, SME entrepreneurial space that didn't rip them off and truly partnered with them. And that's how the business started. The name Netsurit came from, we actually created an insurance product, was the way we positioned it. And we were selling managed services back in 2000.
It's interesting. I kind of started the journey back then. I didn't stick with it, but back about the same time frame, I got out of the military in '97, and I was looking for like small IT companies that didn't have a big enough infrastructure to support having their own network operating center, like the um, like overseeing alerts and outage and stuff like that. So I did this remote one. So I'd set up remote monitoring through kind of the equivalent of VPNs, secure networks back then, and we would monitor all their
Wow.
servers and stuff. We would just show up to fix stuff on their computers. Like these are small mom and pop shops that have you know, probably about $100,000 back then, $100,000 worth of equipment or more. That's kind of our point where we started, and we would go, check on their backup systems, check on, if systems went down, we'd go rebuild them, and we had all their, build out systems. And it was kind of even more specific than that is we didn't touch anything Microsoft. All right. We were all Unix,
Okay.
Linux, Sun Solaris. So, the world I came from back then. So, yeah. So let's talk about, so that's been what you had that company for over 24 years now, 20 something years.
Wow. Now I've got a fascinating story to share about the early days of our business. We serviced quite a lot of doctors,
Yeah.
and there was a group of cardiologists that there were two at one hospital and two at another, and they'd kind of joined forces. So they wanted to create a wide area network between the two hospitals. I think it was 1997 or 1998, and Microsoft didn't have all the technology that they have now, and so we used a Linux solution, which was called OCS by a famous sort of Linux provider. And so anyway, we set it up. Everything was working fine, and at that time, the technology used to create the VPN was ISDN. Okay, and at that time, the telco provider had per second billing. So if you connected for a second, it billed you for a minute. Okay, so what the error in the system was, it would dial, connect, and then drop the line. Dial, connect. So it was doing that about 20 times in a minute. So what happened was everything was working fine, the emails working fine, they were super happy, and they started getting their connectivity bills. So wow, man, it was massive amounts that we ended up getting it squashed and negotiated, but wow, that was a baptism of fire, as you could say.
Yeah, it's interesting as the overage charges that used to exist, right? I remember, I can't remember if it was GoDaddy or somebody prior to GoDaddy, but I actually had a website. I had a few websites, and one of them got featured in the Wall Street Journal, and we had one PDF on there. It was kind of just a guide, and it got downloaded so many times. I got this like overreach. I had the minimum plan for my internet service provider. I got this overreach bill for like $27,000 and had to call them and negotiate. And I'm paying like 19.95 or 27.95 in a month in the 90s. Right? I mean, I was not paying a lot, and I get this bill, and I had to call and negotiate it off because it was like, okay, that's just not. And the sad part is that's the only traction I got out of that article. I didn't really grow the business any. It was really underwhelming and everything else. But that one download, man, just somebody got a hold of it, started like downloading it, and just I don't know if it was even kind of malicious because it was massive what they did. And
Wow.
anyway, but yeah, so let's jump into, let's fast forward to now. You've run this business for over, I guess, probably closer to 30 something. I'm not going to do public math here. I'll mess it up. But,
Yeah.
from the 90s to now, that's at least 20 something plus maybe 30 something years at this point. I want to date myself because I graduated from high school in 90. But the, now you're on this journey of growth, and we were talking about right before the show about some acquisitions and stuff. Let's kind of
Yes.
jump into what's your growth strategy now, and how's that looking?
Sure. So, we've kind of ad hoc done acquisitions in the past.
Hmm.
So going into the end of 2019, just to create a bit of context, I'll give a bit of background. Uh, we kick off our strategic planning quite early. So it was about September, October. We had a hard look at our organic growth, and it was in an absolute hole, Ron, for various reasons. What we were investing in marketing, our differentiation, and so we were really just, our growth had stalled. Then, come the end of 2019, early 2020, we saw the eye of the storm of the pandemic, and we didn't know what impact it was going to have. So we embarked on probably the most aggressive cost cutting we've ever done, and we ended up uh, taking 50% of that, putting it back into cash flow and profits just to protect the viability of the business because we didn't know exactly where it was going to end up. And then the other we were able to put into a growth and innovation fund where we were able to invest. So we'd had a relationship with a buy side advisory firm which had been finding us deals. We'd kind of turned that off. We kicked that off again, and we also invested heavily in our organic growth. So over the last 3 years, we've increased that spend by 5 times, and we ended up through our investment and focusing on that space doing 3 deals last year, one in New Jersey, one and two in New York, and we have 2 deals that we're working on this year. Hopefully, we can still close them this year. And we've actually decided, look, I think from an economic thesis perspective, we have to be organically growing. It's just, there is a law of diminishing returns, so we're trying to balance that. And on the other hand, we've leaned heavily into acquisitive growth because we believe that can create the exponential growth we want to achieve.
So in this acquisition growth, did you guys define a really tight target as like, okay, here's the kind of companies we're looking for, or does that target shift? So tell me about the process of defining what you're looking for in an acquisition.
Yes, for sure. We ended up saying we want to focus on MSPs that have anywhere between, let's call it, $3 to $8 million of revenue. We want MSPs that are growing. We want predominantly a Microsoft technology stack in that base because that's where our skills sit. So we have 14 gold competencies and I think 5 advanced specializations, although Microsoft's changing all of the competencies, which they do from time to time. And so that was critical. We wanted leaders, Ron, that wanted to stay in the business. And that for us was critically important. It's okay, maybe if there are three key leaders and one wants to leave or two, but we want at least some of the key leaders to remain. Uh, and we also wanted to find where there was a congruence or a fit from a culture perspective. Those were some of the key. We want annuity, 60% or more annuity, because that's obviously a big part of our business and that's how we think and operate. Those were the key. And I mean, initially our mandate was the East Coast. We were looking sort of, East Coast US, but we've definitely moved across. We're in discussions with an opportunity on the West Coast right now, and that was essentially the dynamic that we we're looking for. And then we ended up doing one acquisition last year where it was not a standard MSP, and they had a particularly deep skill set in Microsoft Power Platform, which is a set of technologies that enables you to automate business processes without writing much code or any code at all. So that's kind of been our focus area.
Awesome, it sounds interesting. So, I was about to ask you that, sound like you already did. I think did you actually look at geographic, interest? Like, if I were in your shoes as a managed service provider, I'd say, "Where are the biggest tech hubs?" Because the smaller techs are trying to grow. So, Austin, the East Coast, and the Silicon Valley would be, like, the 3 things I can think off of the top of my head. But where are emerging tech hubs to where people are setting up companies and stuff like that, and they're really up and running? So, but maybe I'm missing. I don't. I'm saying that and suggesting that without knowing what your actual target market is. So, what is Netsurit's primary customer? Like, who's your typical bread and
Sure.
butter
Yeah,
customer?
sure. It's 50 to 1,000 user environments. So typically that's where we have real muscle. We either are their IT department or we augment their IT department. And that's where we've lived for the longest time. We've built up a lot of experience in financial services, manufacturing, non-profit. Interestingly, we have a lot of non-profit clients in New York, uh, and a few other areas where we've built real competence, and those are sort of that kind of defines a key. And it's also a customer that understands the impact that technology can have on their growth and their ability to operate and succeed. So that's really kind of what we see as an ideal customer.
Okay, cool. So now you're in this growth through acquisition mode. One of we already talked about kind of the target, the size and stuff and the culture. One of the key things that always concerns me is how do you guys handle integration? Because integration, like getting them to work and getting the key employees to stay after. I think somebody was telling me on the show a few weeks ago that the average is like you lose 30% of the employees, and that seems really high. It's kind of dangerous, actually. So,
Yeah, well, let me share a short story. So when I initially moved to New York in 2016, and we did our first acquisition in New York, Ron, we made every mistake you could imagine. We have one person left from that team today.
ow,
Okay,
ow, ow.
I could tell you stories for days on what transpired there. So we made every mistake you made. Look, we kept a high majority of the clients, learned some tough lessons. Man. I was back doing account management and sales, and so it was really a very very steep learning curve. So we licked our wounds and grew from there. But yeah, integrations. It's wow. You can talk about it for a long time. There's a great book called Scaling Up Excellence, and it is really he spoke about this idea of Buddhism and Catholicism, and Buddhism being what can you just leave in the core dynamic of that organization, and then whereas other organizations, when they might grow acquisitively or how they grow, is very prescriptive, almost like a franchise model. And there are some things we don't want to mess with because what are we buying? We're buying the magic that entrepreneur built. And if we go in there and break that, that's when the people start to leave, the customers start to leave, and then all of the value dissipates. So we don't have a perfect answer, but we need to protect that culture, retain as many of the leaders as we possibly can, and so what do we integrate from day one? We centralize finance, we centralize marketing, specifically from a lead generation perspective, because what we found with a lot of the smaller MSPs, they've literally whittled down that marketing budget to hundreds of dollars, maybe a couple of $1,000s, and we have a significant investment in marketing, and then we allow those leaders to make decisions based on value on what to integrate, and it really happens organically. There's a massive skills shortage in the space, so that in itself drives how can we act as one business across all the regions. But it's there's no we've erred away from saying this is our integration formula. It's cast in stone. Now, like the one deal we did in New Jersey, we hardly integrated. These guys just carried on growing. Like when we did our staff satisfaction survey, which is based on the Gallup 12 questions, and we've been doing it for over 15 years across our regions. New Jersey got the highest results for their staff satisfaction survey out of every single business in the business, every single part of the business. And even with, we've got another survey we do, which is called Operating with Excellence, which is around the theme of one together. Are we working as one business? They got the highest result too. We didn't do anything. They just embraced the opportunity. They're an amazing bunch of leaders. So it's we don't have a clearly defined, this is exactly how we integrate. The only thing I say is marketing, finance, and then we try and be very thoughtful and considered, dependent on the nature of that business, and take it from there.
One of the guests, I think, said it best when he said, the best acquisition is when the integration, you get as much from them, like you're taking things they're doing and integrating it into what you do, as you are having them do things your way or having them like use your systems and stuff. So I see that you've got like some of that. You're actually learning from some of these guys you acquired too.
Definitely.
Let's do a story time. Let's start with the worst. What's the out of that? You said that the first one went really bad, but out of all the acquisitions you've done, what's the most? And don't share anything that'll hurt your business, but what's the most
Sure.
memorable lesson that you won't ever do again?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I have to think of all the mistakes we made when we first did that, bought that business in New York. And, on your question of integration, we kind of just went and said, do this, do that, use that system, change this process, change that policy. And, I still have a great relationship with the founder of that business. He's still a shareholder in our business. And we were wrong. We were wrong. A lot of things that he argued with me about in the beginning, we were solidly wrong. And so that was definitely one. And then a few years before that, we bought a business in Cape Town in South Africa, which was really ad hoc. And we ended up where some of the founders left and actually went directly after customers. And we definitely learned from that. It didn't end up being significant, but it was just from a values perspective, it was very frustrating. Like I'm super old fashioned like that. So no, that was a bit of a nightmare.
That would be disruptive mentally too, because like you're going through your daily thing, and now you got this thing that's really ticking you off over here, and it's in South Africa, and you're in probably New York, you're on the East Coast
Yeah,
somewhere. So
yeah,
yeah. So you mentioned New York, you mentioned South Africa. Kind of like give us the lay of where you're at. Like what's the main hubs for Netsurit?
yeah, sure. So we have offices in New Jersey, New York, and that's where the majority of the customer base in the US is. We have some customers on the West Coast. I think one of the opportunities that COVID definitely presented, customers were more open to meeting with you no matter where you were. And then in South Africa, Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg.
It's interesting. That's a diverse location there. So,
Yeah.
are you expanding in South Africa too, or are you expanding just in the United States right
Yeah,
now?
the focus in South Africa is organic growth, but the focus of our acquisitive growth is definitely in the US.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the process. Like, if because this will help all of our listeners. If you own a business, you decide you're going to do acquisitive growth, you're going to grow through acquisition. The declaration of doing it's the first step, I guess. Like, hey, okay, we're going to do this. How did you guys move from, hey, we're going to? I mean, you probably naturally acquired some stuff before you made that choice. You acquired companies before the last 2 or 3 years, right?
Yes.
So you've done it before, but when you made this, okay, this is one of the fastest ways we can grow, and we are going to take a serious look at this. Kind of, can you give us the steps that you went through to identify, or even after the first mistake? Okay, we just because a lot of people would have quit, right? I know I've talked to many of people in this process. Are like, oh, our first acquisition was awesome. We grew our company by 50% overnight, and the second one almost bankrupted us. I'll never do another one. I mean, that's
Yeah.
normally there's not a
Yeah.
third or fourth or fifth one unless you bring in people that to help correct that path or help you see past your own blind side. I wouldn't call it mistakes or errors or
Yeah.
flaws, but just open the door to ideas and concepts and knowledge that you just don't know that you don't know. Um, what happened from the bad acquisition or the one that went bad afterwards, and to now to have you keep wanting to do it?
Yeah, so I think we kind of looked at our organic growth and realized that if you go back 5 or 10 years, it was much easier to get clients, much easier. So, I listened to the podcast you had with Tim, and Tim spoke to it as well. So it's really tough for MSPs to get to that 10%. And there are exceptions. There's some that are growing very fast. I saw some data out of Enable where it kind of painted a bit of a different picture. But what we're experiencing, and we look at so many businesses, they're struggling from an organic growth perspective. And yeah, so I suppose we what had happened was we had some critical mass. We were able to set aside some funds to make it possible. So we invested, and that so that definitely hit our EBITDA and it hit our profits. But we saw the possibility and the opportunity. So I think if any other MSP is considering this, you need someone that is going to, in your existing team, focus on it. So probably sourcing those opportunities and leveraging maybe existing relationships you have with other MSPs, whether it be through peer groups or through your Microsoft partners, whatever it might be. That's one consideration. I'm not necessarily giving it in order. Then the other consideration is skilling yourself up to understand the full process. And I think there are so many resources available online. There are so many books you can read to really grow your knowledge and understanding about that. And then the other one is access to capital. The one challenge we have in our space is, and definitely something that needs to be thought about, is with the entrance of approximately 60 private equity firms into the MSP space, that is one of the most significant economic forces globally, never just mind the MSP space, but it is the most significant economic force to enter the MSP industry. Now, if you are going to embark on the strategy, there is this PE-backed community that we're competing against. And understanding the PE world and how they think about deals, how they structure deals, how they pay for those companies, and then differentiating your approach to the market is critically important. Because if you go in there thinking, you're gonna pay 4 times for a business, you're going to pay 25% up front and the rest over 5 years, when a PE is maybe paying 6 times and they're paying 90% up front. You need to understand those dynamics of competing and what you're competing against. And I I love this discussion, and I would happily, if anybody ever wanted to reach out, share some of our battle scars and dead bodies on the battlefield, as far as the things we've learned. I mean, good legal counsel is critically important, and that's not just your lawyer friend who's helped you over the last 5 years or last 10 years. This is someone who actually understands deals. I mean, I look at that first deal we did, Ron. Unfortunately, one of my best friends who'd moved to the US, um, she worked initially at Sullivan and Cromwell, and then she worked at Stradling on the West Coast. But I mean, we ended up spending the legal fees we spent on that first acquisition were more than our entire legal fees in the whole business in the last 5 years combined. But I could tell you now, it was part of the reason that deal closed. So
Right.
that's critical, to have legal. Yeah, so this is kind of high level some of the things I would say.
All right. So we talked about the kind of the lesson learned inside. What's your biggest win? Like, I mean, surely something stands out as like, I really love that we did this. What's the biggest win you've had inside of buying companies or doing acquisition growth?
That's a great question. Sure. You know, high level across these acquisitions, when I look at the single greatest constraint when a business is growing fast, it's access to great leaders and great talent. And I look now what's happened over the last 2 years with the quality of leadership and talent that has joined the business. It is just I'm inspired. I'm learning and growing. When I'm showing up for our exco meeting, I want to raise my game because these guys have raised the game across the board. So that's got to be, in my mind, the biggest win. And you know the thing that a lot of them have come in with, the majority of them, pretty much all of them, is with a growth mindset. Is almost, and you wouldn't think so if you've run a business for 10, 20 years. It's part of you and how you did things. And these, many of them have just said, put ego aside. We're now part of a bigger, purpose-driven organization. And where can I add value? Because the truth is, every leader that takes that approach, when the business is acquired, they'll end up with more opportunity than they can say yes to.
So what that raises the question is, how are you sourcing the deals? And here, I'm going to preface the question. The reason I'm asking is because I would think if you were going through investment bankers, brokers, and advisors that do exit planning, the growth mindset is they're worn out most of the time. They're wanting to leave for a reason. They've got an exit planned. But so how are you sourcing the deals? And if you're sourcing it through those sources, how are you converting them from wanting to exit and have their big ticket and their yacht money to having a growth mindset? So I have a sneaking suspicion your acquisition targets don't necessarily come from that pool. So
Yeah. So we've probably, if I were to say, over the last, let's say the last 5 years, looked at probably 50 companies, and we've done, uh, if you include 20, we've done 4 deals. And so how are we sourcing it? We have a buy side advisory firm that looks for opportunities for us. We have a retainer with them, and they've been amazing. They really, really have. Great guys. And so of the 3 deals we did last year, 2 we did through them. The other deal came from a referral from one of our marketing partners. We've looked at multiple deals through other sources, and there are 3 pillars here of consideration. And I just want to kind of frame that for the next thing that I'm about to say is, firstly, you will find with these entrepreneurs, their people are their family, and they want to make sure their people are going to be looked after. Number 2, their clients are the next concentric circle of their family. They feel deeply connected and loyal to them. And then finally, they want to ensure that they see a good value for what they've spent building. Now, when you balance those three, uh, in my mind, I find it very difficult to understand how you can balance those three and leave immediately. I just don't understand that, because there's a transition period. Even if you look at the Gallup research, and where Marcus Buckingham's book, First Break All the Rules, and the continued employee engagement research they did, where now they've researched over 2 million staff, over 100,000 companies, and it comes down to people work at companies because of the relationship with the manager. Now, if the key manager leaves on close, there's some maths that just doesn't work there. So for me, when we are dealing with deals that are coming from brokers and investment banks, what's happened is the economics of that has hyped up the thinking around the value piece, that some of the true legacy stuff, I believe, gets lost around your people and your clients. So the deals that we've done, typically they've not been in a process. They're balanced. They're not caught in the hype of the sale of the business, and they're still running their business. They're still focused on the business. And it's our process as well. Is we don't really talk much numbers in the beginning. We just, is there a fit? Get to know each other. I share as openly, as transparently as I can, so that even if we don't do something, they can learn, and they generally do the same in return. So we're all learning, and if there isn't a fit, we don't do a deal. So we do talk to investment banks. We do get deals that we have discussions with. So I'll give you an example. We've got a deal from an investment bank. The company's in California. Man, this guy was an absolute pleasure. I love talking to him. Great business, great fit. And then we got, I think it must have been like 6 or 7 meetings in, and his valuation expectations were twice revenue, which for an MSP is just, it's like a total non-starter. So, and typically when there is some dynamic that happens, when there's this hype of the sale, there's something that happens with those valuation expectations. And look, I'm not saying all investment banks are bad. Definitely not. They play an important role. And some investment banks, I think, do a good job of keeping people realistic and informing them as well.
I have an underlying issue with a lot of brokers and investment banks and stuff, and that's there's too many of them, to be honest. There's and not all of them are good. It's kind of like I came from the real estate world, and kind of give you an example. The small market of Tulsa, Oklahoma, can often have 6,000 agents, like licensed agents, people who have licenses, and on average there's less than 2,000 homes currently listed at any given time, right? So there's 3 agents for every house listed on the market. I think the brokerage world is a little bit like that too, in that it's a lot of states don't even have licensing. Oklahoma, for instance, doesn't have a licensing requirement to be a business broker. A lot of states, I think something like 30 plus states, have no licensing requirement. And then a lot of the other states, like here in California, I don't think there's any special qualifications or tests other than there's real estate tied to them a lot of times. So you have to be a real estate broker in order to have your brokerage license under real estate to sell a business. So I think it's on the business owner like you and myself to really, if there's a broker advisor involved or you're choosing one yourself, what do they really know? What are their credentials? How many deals have they
Yeah.
done? It's just because the barrier to entry into that market is so low. Anybody, I mean, quite honestly, when we first started this, I've only been in this space for about 2.5 years now. I had one of my friends go, "Hey, I'll just go buy a brokerage," and he went and bought a Murphy's brokerage, and he thought he was going to source deals through that. And I was like, like, now you want to be a broker? I'll hand you a card, and you're a broker. I was like, I just don't think that serves me well. I don't know how that would. I don't think it gives me any more clout or anything other than, hey, I'm an investor, I'm interested. But it's
Yeah.
the barrier entry is so low. I think that, and there's good ones out there. I partnered with a really
For
good
sure.
one. Yeah, and you've probably you've done your vetting, but I just want to preemphasize that with anybody who listens to the show. If you're thinking about going out there, and even inside some of these organizations, like the big ones, Sun and Trans World and stuff, they're not all equal. Even
Yeah.
like one broker to the next, they're not all equal. And the
Yeah.
problem you're talking about is sky high evaluations, I think, comes from that world of, especially their brokers and investment banks to get paid retainers and upfront fees, and they're trying to win business and grow theirs. And some of these things are even public or have investors, so they're trying to prove that they're worth keeping their job. So their numbers always constantly have to go up. And it's a scenario where somebody comes to me and go, "Hey, the last advisor said I could get 1.2 million, and like we can do two," without really, like, taking a look at it and thinking, like, a deep dive on the thing and saying, "Well, it's probably really only worth 800K," right?
Yeah.
And that happens more often than not in those advisory roles. I love going out. The reason I was asking the whole scenario is I love going out, on off market. That's what I wanna like, I like to identify who it is you wanna acquire, who it is that meets what is your culture? What are you looking for? And then making a huge list of everybody out in the space that's like that. And then, like, who are the most likely that wanna partner with us? Who are the most likely
Yeah.
that, would be ready for a transition like this? Like, and then go talk to those guys, right? I've yet
Yeah.
to I think a lot of people underestimate this, but, I think more CEOs than you would imagine would entertain a conversation like that if you target your market tight enough where they know there's a benefit to working with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think, an MSP owner slash CEO likes talking to another MSP owner slash CEO. And, so that dynamic has seen us being received very well. And yeah, I think there is this fear of some of the brokers, investment banks, private equity firms in the MSP industry, and just go and understand it. There are some great investment banks out there. There's some great PE firms, and we haven't dealt with a lot of brokers, but they are out there, and you just find the fit in any relationship. Look at the key fundamentals that make an alignment for you.
So what do you think, this is a common question I like to ask. What do you think are some of the myths about your profession and your space that you'd like to debunk? Um, as far as like, 'cause there's people out there thinking right now, there's people listening to the show or hear the show, and they're thinking, I've been in IT for 15 years. I'm going to go buy a managed service provider. I'm going to go buy myself an MSP. What are some of the common myths, or what would you say to a guy like that?
Yeah, it very quickly can uh, can consume can consume you. So the idea that it's a low touch and it's almost like closing a new customer is definitely not. Um, yeah, and we've learned the hard way, man. Wow, we've made so many mistakes. I'm glad I'm still here to tell the story. But so the one is the amount of time, and I think just cannot be underestimated. And the other one that I think MSPs probably grasp better than others, that this idea of just going buying someone's business and getting rid of the key people and the key leaders, so you can cut those costs and just suddenly double the profits. I just don't buy that. And you hear of them, I don't buy it. They need to stay around in some capacity, and maybe it can phase into an advisory capacity, but that's not that for me is a myth. And I think the examples, and people can come on the show and tell stories about how it worked for them, but I don't buy that.
It's interesting. Managed service providers is just, you know, in the business side of things, if you mirrored what you guys do for the business side of it, they're business advisors, right? You're just advising on technology. So you have the
Yes.
same inherent problems in that. It's like when the lights go off and everybody goes home, 90 something percent of your assets walk out the door every single night and go spend time with their family, right? So to say that you're going to
Yes.
go in and it's just the one of the very few, like, if I was buying a financial advisory firm, a management advisory firm, or an MSP, people are the assets. I mean, you buy any company, people are the assets. But in this case,
Mm.
you can't. I get that. I'm 100% aligned with what you're saying. You can't go in and just say I'm going to replace the top management, because the top management is why those customers are there, right?
Yeah.
Um, those customers have been, are there because they like who they're working with, they like how they're being treated, and to be honest, it's there's a I would say 50 to 60% of your business isn't your technology as much as it is your ability, the human interaction you have with those clients, customers. You lose them if you can't keep the technology up, but you get to land them and keep them because they like working with you. They like how you interact with them, how you communicate with them, how you treat them in general.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we were talking to an amazing business in Denver. Weren't able to close the deal, but I had such an amazing discussion with him. He's in his late 50s. His two partners were in their early 60s, and they were going to leave, but he was going to stay around for a period of time. And so I think it was going to be 3 years. So in 3 years you can transition relationships, make sure you blow those customers away, respect the legacy of the exiting shareholders, and also protect the culture. And we didn't do that deal, but I definitely think there is time where these guys can move on, but there needs to be a transition, no question about it.
That's interesting as you say that. Was this like in the last year and a half, 2 years?
Yes.
So I was looking at one in Denver, in Colorado, same scenario. The CEO was willing to stay around for a while. Just a couple of other executives were wanting to leave. They were doing 5.5, 6 million, so they're in your target range, maybe 7 million. It's been a while, and I basically didn't go very far with them because, like, 2/3 of the team wanted to leave in the first 2 to 3 years. Like, two of them were leaving soon,
Oh, wow.
and so I just like, okay, no. But I didn't have the infrastructure, right? This would have been I was looking for a cornerstone in the space. I was looking for the anchor, right, to build
Yes.
something off of. And as an anchor, I need that leadership, right? Because there's a lot of places, areas I didn't know. So we might have actually. There's a slight chance we talked to the same company. I won't say it because both under NDA with that. But there's a slight chance that
Yeah, sure.
and our worlds are kind of intertwined. We know a lot of the same people. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
Right. So, maybe that, I'm sure, one of those people actually one of my network actually referred it to me to take a look at it, so good chance that you and I actually took a look at the same thing. I only went to 2 calls with them once he told me that, the management situation, I just like, "Okay." And we were probably right in the middle of COVID or right towards the middle of it, and finding
Yes.
people was like I just interviewed 200 marketing agencies, and these are guys that know how to market and know how to get their voice out, and
Yes.
and lead generation and finding the right people were their top 2 concerns out of 200 plus marketing agencies, right? Imagine being like, and that you figure that they should be able to, if a marketing agency has a hard time marketing that they need employees, right? So I stepped back, and at the time, I actually had a friend who owned a staffing company. They've since sold it, but a headhunting firm, mostly in the oil and gas space. But they knew how to hire engineers and stuff. And I even chatted with them. I was like, how long would it take you to find me 2 executive level managed service providers, techies, in the Denver market, or willing to relocate to the Denver market? And she was like, this is somebody who's been doing this for years. They were on the lines of 6 months, like 6 months. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah. So,
Wow.
all right.
I mean,
So,
the other. I mean, just thinking about it now that I don't want to miss this
go ahead.
share, because I mean we both know him, but I mean I've read a few things on my understanding of private equity. I think the one that kind of started to open my eyes to it was Orrin Klopper's book, Lessons for CEOs from Private Equity, and then I read a series of others, but it didn't really land. But when I read Adam's book,
Mm,
Private Equity Playbook, and then the exit playbook I read afterwards. Suddenly now, so if you're an MSP, and I think you're either thinking about potentially uh, joining a bigger platform or business, or if you're thinking of embarking on an acquisitive growth strategy, I would read both of those books. And
yeah.
Adam Coffey is really, he's just, man, that's a gift to our space.
And if you guys Google around and see Adam Coffey actually exited a heat and air company that HVAC, I went 6 or 7, like multiple times, to the tune of a couple billion with a B at the end of it. Don't let
Yeah.
that discourage you because I've read those books, and he wrote those a while back, right before I had him on the show, or right during, like, I think I read part of one. I got him on the show because it was just timing issue. I couldn't get through it. And then I dove through them on audiobook driving. They're in such a way that anything in those books applies to any business you have out there.
Agreed.
Don't let your research
Agreed.
and who he is discourage you from listening to him, because and it directly relates to, any book on, even like a heat and a lot of businesses are managed service providers, whether they want to call themselves or not. A heat and air company is a managed service provider, right? They're maintaining and
Yeah, you're right.
repairing heat and air companies. A plumbing company maintaining, and installing and configuring plumbing solutions. It's just a difference of what the technology is, right? So,
Yes.
like
I
now, if
couldn't
you're
agree with you more.
yeah. Now, if you're a Shopify store, that may be something different. Like, you're selling products and stuff like that. But there's still a lot of that stuff will apply. But yeah, Adam's still one of my favorite. I refer people to him all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, brilliant, brilliant guy, and like really cool under pressure. Yeah. So that's some great books. Um,
Yeah.
so
Great books.
what's the long-term vision? What do you guys? I mean, you're going to grow. I mean, you're growing. You're on this growth path now. If you're talking to Adam, you're on the right track, right? You're going through acquisition. You're really
Yes.
careful who you pick out. You're going through this process. To what game? Like, to what? What's the vision? Where are you headed?
So I would love to build one of the biggest MSPs in the market and protect our culture as we grow and protect the quality of service. And at a point, we will probably take on a private equity partner, but I want to deeply, deeply understand that before we do that. And so it's almost an MSP, dominant player in our market for MSPs run by MSP entrepreneurs. That's
Yeah.
really, really what I would love to achieve.
You know, this may not apply to you guys, but I actually see, things merge and things happen. I honestly think that, and this is me being maybe immature in the market space, right? I don't know this space very well. I've only been in 2 years, so we can count this up maybe to my ignorance. But I honestly think at some point, I've already seen some of the smaller investors create their own funds and raise funds. I actually see a lot of companies, maybe even like yours, where you've got a company, you're in multiple locations, you're growing, to actually create a wing that's a private equity where you own the private equity firm. You're out there doing that. You're raising funds with the private equity. It's doing its thing, and it's acquiring
Yes.
things to fit into your model that you're doing. It's just a different set of lawyers and a different set of team members. I mean, like, it's
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I've had those discussions with Adam. So that is something we're exploring, but it's a very, very interesting dynamic.
yeah, it's like a what is that? Buy versus build mentality, right? Do I buy this service or
Yes.
do I build it myself? Um, I see that a lot of companies, and maybe I'm just predicting here, pulling a rabbit out my hat, but I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a little bit more of that. Companies that they want to grow, they're going to continue to grow. They know there's money out there that's untapped. There's a lot of dry powder sitting out there. They'll set up their own funds, like the same way like a lot of these guys are creating. I just had a guy on here that created a SPAC to raise money to do their next big acquisition. There's money out there that's willing to commit to it, and if you've got a clear vision and stuff, there are investors that will put money towards what you're doing. Now, the real trick is that opens a whole new world. I don't know how many investors you've taken on or what your cap table looks like and stuff, but understanding that can make or break a company too.
Yeah, sure. No, it's critically important, and I think there's a lot of investment interest in the space, there's understanding in the space, and it's just making the right decisions. There's definitely a critical mass that's required to pull that off, but it's strategically, I think you're on the money there as far as what is, and I think going to happen.
One of the biggest ways I think Adam made his money, and the thing that intrigued me about what he did by selling his company over and over and over again, like so for you guys that don't know the story, he started or got brought in as a CEO of a company. They
Yes.
got acquired by a private equity firm, but they only acquired like 80%, and they left 20% on the table. And then he grew that, and then they did it again over and over again. So he kept getting at least. And I didn't get into the numbers. I don't normally pry with people and say, well, how much did you make? But you have to imagine if you got a piece of each one of those, those acquisitions, these mergers and acquisitions transactions, you know, he's set, right? When you
100%.
acquire when what's your strategy when you bring on or acquire a company? Are you leaving something on the? Are you allowing them to
Most
participate
definitely.
in the future growth?
Most definitely. That is one of our. So when I spoke earlier around the three pillars and the dynamic of how, I don't know how you can protect your people, clients, and good value if you just want to exit and get like 95% cash up front. Uh, our thesis is, imagine now it's a $10 million valuation, just as an example, and the portion that you're getting paid for is 70%, and then you roll that $3 million as an example. Now, our belief is in the medium to longer term, you're going to get more potentially for that amount that you've rolled than you got for actually the entire valuation up front. And you can protect the relationships with your people. You can protect the relationship with your customers, and you're in a bigger team now where you can let go of certain things. You following up on debtors and or receivables and dealing with different HR issues. Those are things you can let go of to focus on the things you're really, really gifted at.
I was talking to a guy who kind of did he kind of did he bought another. So kind of give you this story. I don't want to give him his name because I didn't get permission to do this. He bought another company because it had a very strong leadership so that he could retire. So he became like the chairman of the board, the advisor. There's a nickname they're giving out there where they call it a aquatire or they were half retire, where you acquire somebody else because they run a similar business as you, and
Yes.
he retires off. And I asked him, well, so what do you do? We were chatting. I was trying to get him on the show, but he's not quite ready because they're still in the integration phase, and he doesn't want to say anything to disrupt the process. But I was like, what do you do now that's different? And he says, I do the stuff I love, right? The guy loved going to golf with the clients. He loved they have a big house out by a lake, and, he hosts dinner parties. He likes, that elbow rubbing, social. His whole life's around. His wife is an event planner. I mean, that's what they enjoy doing, that the
Yeah.
showcasing the business and stuff. So their business is growing like mad now because the other guys running the day-to-day operations, putting systems and processes in. They run it. He acquires something that's run off EOS, so it's very systematic. And
Oh, okay.
he's not. He's creative and he's social, and he just kind of says, "Okay, I don't even know that stuff, but it's working really well. I'm gonna stay away from it, and I'm just gonna go." He took a bunch of guys out that used to be clients and out to dinner, one by one, not like in a group, but went out and met with them, seeing what they're going. Ended up winning a bunch of them back. He just spent time doing the stuff he used to have time
Yeah.
to do that built his company, and that's a hell of an exit, right? Um,
Yeah.
he used to pull 60, 80 hours a week, stressed out of his mind to try to keep this thing afloat. Now he says, I go to dinner parties, lunches, and golf, and I go to board meetings and planning sessions, and I still feel like I've got to find something else to do with my time. So,
Yeah. No, it's a perfect example.
yeah,
Absolutely perfect example.
cool. What piece of advice would you consider most important to business owners out there that are thinking, well, I might want to partner with you or another managed service provider? How can they start preparing themselves to be ready for that conversation with a company like you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Yeah, if if you are in a place as an MSP owner where you're so burnt out and you literally see this as a way to just get out and get rid of it, I would pause and take the time to just steady the ship and try and get yourself back to a place of balance. Because I think if you enter into an opportunity in that situation, I don't know if you're going to make the right decision, because we've all, been in business where it's just too much going on. You're too stressed. You're feeling burnt out. So that's the one perspective I would give. And then the next one would be, think about how you manage the finances of the business, because in any process, if there is a fit, there will be a request saying, okay, can we see the numbers so we can understand that? So I think that's something to apply your mind to. We've looked at a couple of opportunities where they didn't use GOB. They literally had a friend kind of doing it. So we couldn't actually make sense of the numbers. Great guys. It seemed like they had a great business, but we actually couldn't get a basic view of the accounting. So we had to walk away. I would think about depth and succession. Hypothetically, you want to do a 2 to 3 year transition, which is a lot more palatable for an acquirer who in your team could succeed you. That's definitely something to think about. And just housekeeping, get your house in order. Have you got your agreements in place? Are you on top of how are you measuring service levels with your customers? And just have a look at the business. But if you do it if you're feeling just totally burnt out and you just want to get this monkey off your back, that's not the right time. And look, if you are thinking about it and you want to have a discussion, you can reach out to me. I will, and at a point that it makes sense, we could, bring in Adam, who's one of our advisory board members, and you can get a perspective directly from an MSP, and then you can get a perspective from a guy that's in his 20-year career bought 58 businesses, and that would be one way to, we could share our experience.
Awesome. How do people reach out to you? Let's just go ahead and do that. We're at 56 minutes into the show already. So how do people reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you?
I'm very responsive. So you can text me on my mobile, 917-517-7763. And you can also reach me on LinkedIn under Orrin Klopper, ORRIN KLOPPER. Or you can email me, ORRIN at Netsurit, NETSURIT.com.
And I have those in the show notes for you guys listening out there. We cover a lot of stuff and stuff. Let's do a couple of wrap-up things. What are the big, if you could pick the 3 takeaways, if somebody didn't remember anything else from the show, only 2 or 3 things, what would you want them to walk away from the show with?
If you're selling your business or considering selling your business, I'm sure you know and understand that there are these 3 dynamics: your people, your clients, and the value that you receive for that. I deeply believe you need to stay around for at least 2 to 3 years in that business. So that's something I really think is important. Secondly, I would go through a process of understanding what a potential deal looks like, understanding the MSP space, what's happening from an M&A perspective, because I think a lot of that information is publicly available. You can listen to some of the stuff on your podcast, which is very informative. Your podcast with Tim Mueller, very informative. You even talk to Tim, to build your own knowledge and understanding. And I think it's also how to grow your knowledge on private equity space. Try and grow and understand that. I'd definitely read both of Adam's books, Private Equity Playbook and Exit Playbook.
And he's mentioned Tim a couple of times. What he's referring to is ITX Marketplace, one of our channel partners. So we are channel partner with ITX in full disclosure. So there'll be links to that in the show notes too. But if you want to read to Tim, and Mueller, I believe. Did I get his last name right? Okay.
Yes, perfect.
But I remember people's faces better than I do names. So But yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I can get you in touch with him too. But yeah, first step is let's reach out to Orrin, and especially if you have something in that target. You said between what 5 million and 8 million or somewhere in there. I get the numbers
Between
right.
3 to 8, three
Three
to
to
eight
eight,
million. Yeah,
$3 to 8 million, and that revenue or EBITDA?
revenue.
Revenue. So you're doing 3 million to 8 million in revenue, and you're thinking about wanting to partner with somebody, go, expand your reach, and you've got the, you think you might fit his culture, and you like what he heard today. Reach out to him, and then from there, if that doesn't work, certainly check the show notes. Reach out to the ITX guys. They've been doing this since the '80s, and really know the space, and they primarily work with managed service providers. So, uh, real quick, one big ask. If the audience or myself could do anything for you, who would you want to be introduced to, or what would you want us to help you do?
Yeah, I think you actually covered it. We'd love to talk to MSPs that are considering this journey, and I think we can share a lot of experience. That would be that would be super valuable, and I always learn from those discussions. So there is a selfish piece to it as well.
I get it. That's why I do the podcast. I learn from all you guys. So I want to appreciate
Yeah,
having you on the show today, Orrin, and I thank you for taking the time to be here. The audience is going to love what we did. Hang out for a few minutes after the show, and we'll call it at the end.
absolute pleasure, and thanks for your show. I've learned a lot from it. Not only this discussion, but the various podcasts I've listened to.